About 2 weeks ago, I made a video going over the Seahawks free agency, acquisitions, departures, and trades, and evaluating how I think they've done so far. And in this video, I'm going to be doing the same thing for a handful of other teams that I find particularly interesting. It is important to mention that I won't be going quite as in-depth as I did with my Seahawks video, because naturally I'm going to know more about the players and needs of the team that I'm a fan of than the other 31 teams in the league. I'm not going to have any meaningful commentary to provide about the Raiders re-signing a third-string defensive tackle, for example. With that covered, as a Seahawks fan, it's probably not much of a surprise that the first team I'm going to be going over is the Raiders, who have acquired former Seahawks Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. Let's start with the hiring of Pete Carroll, and even as a Seahawks fan, I have surprisingly little to say about this move. Now, I loved Pete Carroll, but I wasn't really that upset when we fired him because we'd been stuck in neutral for so long that it had to be a coaching issue. But what I will say is that for all his flaws, he is still a good coach. And I think at minimum he gives the Raiders a high floor, which at this point that's kind of what they need right now. They just need to pull themselves out of the gutter, and I feel like Pete Carroll can do that for them. Now let's look at their departures, and there are 3 notable names I wanted to talk about here. The first is safety Marcus Epps, who, I'll be honest, I know next to nothing about, but his name sounds familiar, so I'm assuming he was either a starting safety or he just got a lot of playing time. He's out, and so is quarterback Gardner Minshew. Alexander Mattison is also gone, and I'm pretty sure he was their starting running back. And most significantly, they lost Robert Spillane, who was a very productive linebacker for them for the last 2 years. Considering their defense was already pretty disappointing last year, losing one of their best defensive players and not named Max Crosby is a pretty big deal. But speaking of Max Crosby, let's get into the players they were able to re-sign, which includes guys like defensive end Malcolm Kuntz and safety Isaiah Pola-Mao, both of whom are currently listed as starters on the depth chart. And of course, Max Crosby, who's back on a huge contract extension. Some notable free agency signings include Alex Kappa, Raheem Mostert, Eric Stokes, Devin White, and Jeremy Chin. And of course, perhaps the biggest move of all, trading a 3rd round pick for Geno Smith. I'm still very high on Geno. I feel like he was in many ways set up to fail in 2024, so a 3rd round pick for him is a bargain in my opinion. Although I will say I think they slightly overpaid him with that contract extension. Overall, I think the Raiders have put themselves in a spot where they can be mediocre. And while that was a negative in the Seahawks case, I think that's more of a step in the right direction for the Raiders. My only concerns are the defense and the lack of receiving help, because outside of Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker, I've never heard of a single one of their receivers. But I'm sure they can address those things in the draft, and as for the receiver problem, Brock Bowers exists. All things considered, I'd give the Raiders a B- for the moves that they've made so far. Now, once again, as a Seahawks fan, it's probably not surprising that the next team I'll be going over is the Giants, who signed Russell Wilson. But more on that in a moment. Full transparency, I didn't see any notable players that were released by the Giants, and since I'm already behind schedule and this video will probably come out late as it is, I didn't want to spend more time digging deeper into that. Not to mention, this is the Giants we're talking about. How many good players could they possibly have lost if they didn't have many to begin with? Sorry, Giants fans. They did re-sign Greg Van Roten, who I know nothing about, but he's their starting guard. And they also re-signed Darius Slayton and Tommy DeVito. They picked up a pair of receivers in free agencies, Zach Pascal and Lil Jordan Humphrey, as well as building up the defense with Chauncey Golston, Paulson Adebo, and Javon Holland. But of course, Russell Wilson is the biggest splash, and I'm not really sure what the goal is here. Maybe this is a situation like the Raiders where they're just trying to get a good quarterback on a bad team so that they can be average instead of atrocious. But something about this situation just does not seem as good as the Raiders. I'm interested to see how this experiment plays out because I really don't know what to expect. All I can say is Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Tommy DeVito makes a very interesting quarterback room. Overall, I'd give the Giants a C+ grade. They acquired some good talent like Javon Holland and Paulson Adebo, and of course Russell Wilson is a massive upgrade at quarterback, but I just don't know what is really going to be achieved here. Moving on to the last team of the video, we're going to be going over the Bears. Much like the Raiders, they've got themselves a new coach, but Ben Johnson is a whole lot more exciting than Pete Carroll. I'm interested to see what he can do with Caleb Williams after Matt Eberflus seemingly held him back. Some notable departures for the Bears include Keenan Allen, who was replaced by Olamide Zaccheaus in free agency, and Tevin Jenkins, who was lost in the midst of a massive offensive line overhaul. The Bears signed tight end Durham Smythe and defensive tackle Grady Jarrett, but most significantly in my eyes was the signing of Drew Dahlman, as well as trading a 4th round pick for Joe Tooney and a 6th round pick for Jonah Jackson, replacing their entire interior offensive line. If only a certain team in Seattle could figure out how to do that. These roster moves make the Bears very intriguing to watch next year because who knows how much Caleb Williams could improve with that offensive line improvement. Not to mention Ben Johnson's system and the potential to add even more talent in the draft. It's possible that these offseason moves could lead to Caleb Williams' breakout. And for that, I'm going to give the Bears an A grade for these moves. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe. And if you'd like more videos like this one, let me know in the comments what teams you'd like me to cover next.